What is a dark secret that you have? Story 1. When I was a small child, my mother's friend Amy was babysitting. Amy had a son, and for whatever reason, he broke one of his brand new toys while I was there. When his mother found out, he blamed me, and she believed him. She let all the kids go outside in the pool while I had to stay inside and do the dishes. Well, I wasn't washing them the way she wanted, so she grabbed the back of my neck, pushed my face toward the hot soapy water, and slapped me. Later that night, I had to shower at her house, so while I was in the bathroom, I did something to her mouthwash and conditioner out of spite. I still smile thinking about how she probably never knew what I did. Story 2. I planned an elaborate 2-plus-year plan to disappear that would let everyone down gently in the least painful way. I moved to another state, basically told everyone to leave me alone, and just stayed quiet until people stopped calling. After that, I'd give it about 6 months, take care of some final things, and then end it. The goal was to get a "he wasn't missed" reaction rather than a "what a tragedy" one. The problem? My mother. She drove to see me monthly and called me every day. She always knew something was off because she'd end our conversations with, "Remember, I need you around and will always love you." And it shook me every time. Later on, my best friend started calling me constantly. Annoyed, I finally picked up. It went something like, "Finally, you jerk, let's catch up." And he would do that weekly. Then, my mom brought me a cat. She helped get me into therapy and to a psychiatrist. He suggested getting an emotional support animal. That cat saved my life more than once. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I started writing final letters to everyone. I apologized to every person I wrote to for how things turned out, but it was the only way I could manage. Then came my mom's letter. I cried harder than I ever had. When I got to the part about taking care of the cat, I broke down completely. I cried myself to sleep at my desk. I woke up to gentle taps and little chirps from the cat, because it was time for his treats and food. He still lives with me, and I love him more than anything. I'm a grown man who'll drop anything to pet a cat. To me, they're little angels. Nobody knows about this except my wife, mother, and therapist, and it's the hardest part of my past. Story 3. I grew up in Maryland. When I was 16, my friends and I were driving home from a party. All of us had been drinking, so we took a back road to avoid trouble. Suddenly, we came across an overturned Jeep and immediately pulled over, completely panicked. The driver was crushed, but the passenger was still alive. He couldn't speak and was struggling to breathe. One of my friends pulled him out of the vehicle, and then he just stopped breathing. He died right in front of us. At that point, we were all terrified and didn't know what to do. We debated whether to call the police or just leave, because none of us wanted to risk a DUI. In the end, we went home. As soon as we got back, one of my friends took responsibility and called the police to report everything that had happened. Here's the part that still haunts me. The 2 people in the Jeep were the parents of a girl in my class, and I thought about that night every day for the rest of high school. So many things could have been done differently. Story 4. I used to work at an investment bank. To get the job, I had to complete several assessments, including an Excel financial modeling test. Now, I'm quite experienced with Excel and have built many complex financial models, but this particular task was to fix a very poorly made one. It wasn't intentionally bad. It just seemed like whoever made it didn't fully know what they were doing. They left me in a room with a laptop to complete the task. I opened the spreadsheet and had no idea where to start. It made no sense. As I was scanning through the tabs, trying to find something I could work on, I noticed a file saved on the desktop. Someone else's previous attempt was still there. I opened it, studied what the previous candidate had done, and added a few tweaks of my own. In the end, I got the job. Story 5. Not exactly dark, but I'm pretty sure my son isn't biologically mine. There was a lot of doubt about the date of conception and multiple people his mother was involved with at the time. But after months of being told he was mine, I eventually accepted it. Or at least told myself I did. Cut to when he was 3 months old, she decided she was scared of him and couldn't take care of him. He's now 7 years old and hasn't seen his mother since. She's completely vanished and doesn't even check in on him. He's my son, no matter what anyone could tell me now, as far as I'm concerned. I've raised him and loved him unconditionally for the past 7 years, and will continue to do so for the rest of his life. And if I'm being honest, I'm really scared to get a DNA test more than anything. I'm afraid that if I found out he isn't mine, I might not look at him the same way. I don't think I'd ever stop loving him, but you never really know how you'll react in an emotional moment until it happens. Story 6. You know those terrible stories where you hear something unthinkable happen to a child? I was that child, and the person who hurt me was my father. It happened throughout my early years, and my mother knew. She walked in a few times and immediately turned around. She knew. We all knew. I started acting out as a child, and unsurprisingly, I was sent to a therapist who was a friend of my parents. I told him everything. He confronted my father and gave me the option to report it, but also warned me of what that would mean. I chose not to, and the secret continued. It stopped when I was 11 after I told him I knew something was wrong. He still made a few attempts after that, mostly when intoxicated, and occasionally apologized. Years later, I met my amazing wife, and after our first child was born, I knew I had to tell my mother and leave for the safety of my son. Even though she knew what happened, my mother told me she didn't believe me and that I should never come back. That was the last thing she ever said to me. It's been 5 years. My wife and son have given me the life I never thought I'd have. My father was a respected doctor, which is why no one ever believed me. I later found out he did the same to his brother. I often worry about the vulnerable patients he treated during his career. I also live with PTSD and frequent vivid, violent dreams. Doctors believe that because my abuse started so early, my brain didn't fully develop properly in certain areas, which causes me to react instantly with intense anxiety or anger. But I've worked incredibly hard to become fully functional. I own a home, have a stable job, good credit, an amazing wife, and the most perfect son. There are times I wish I had parents to share my accomplishments with, but I've come to understand that they didn't want me to succeed, because if I did, others might believe me. So to my parents, despite everything, I'm doing great. Story 7. I've been the black sheep of my family my entire life, no matter what I do. It's not a joke to me. It's been deeply hurtful. For the past couple of years, I've been secretly taking classes, saving money, and tying up all loose ends. I've created a full escape plan, complete with backup options in case things don't go as expected. In just a few months, I'm buying a one-way plane ticket, getting rid of my phone, and starting an entirely new life. I'll be gone from theirs forever. They have no idea what's coming. They'll cry and ask why. But I won't wonder. I already know. And I can't wait. Story 8. Years ago, I got a summer job at a grocery store. I was a teenager from a struggling family, just trying to work so we could afford food. My mom couldn't afford to feed us during the summer without the school lunches, but she made slightly too much to qualify for food assistance. If you've ever been in that position, you know how it goes. The manager was extremely rude and fired me 2 weeks in because, and I quote, "I just don't like your personality." We had never actually spoken before that point. I cried because my mom was counting on me to help pay for groceries that week, and I told him that. He told me I was being dramatic. The store used special barcodes to mark down expired items. I realized when I got home that I still had some of those printed stickers in my pocket from that day. I ended up copying them onto sticky paper and used them to get discounted groceries all summer. Technically, I paid for everything at the self-checkout, but I was getting items like salmon and ribs for $2, big veggie trays for $1, and premium cheese for under $1. I was careful not to draw attention. No full carts of expensive stuff. I'd make several smaller purchases at different stores. It was a large national chain, and I always paid in cash. I never got caught. I told my mom I had won an academic scholarship, and that's how I was able to help with groceries. I don't regret it, and the statute of limitations is long gone anyway. Story 9. My best friend from childhood came over to my college dorm to hang out one night. He bought some substances from guys living on my hall for a party he was going to, and honestly, I was surprised by how confident and well-spoken he was while doing it. Before he left, he told me not to tell his mother anything about what he was doing, but to let her know he loved her if anything happened. I thought it was strange, but I let him go. We had plans for the next day, and I figured maybe he had just developed a darker sense of humor since we last spent time together. Looking back, he showed all the warning signs, but I didn't want to see them, so I let him leave. He didn't make it. He crashed his car later that night, wasn't wearing a seatbelt, and likely wasn't in a clear state of mind. His mother asked me what happened. I didn't tell her the full truth. I wanted her to believe it was an innocent accident. I didn't want her to carry the weight of what he'd gotten into. I'm still keeping his secret. Story 10. When I was a young teenager, 13 or 14, about 32 years ago, I was in a program called Explorers. It's part of the Boy Scouts, I believe. Our group worked alongside the local sheriff's department. We were basically young police officers in training. We'd go to the shooting range, ride along with officers, and work special events. We had uniforms and were even allowed to carry handcuffs and a radio. Each year, there was a weekend event that felt like boot camp. It was held at a National Guard base, and kids from all over the state attended. There were a few hundred of us, ages 13 to 17. We slept in a barracks-style room with about 30 kids in each. At the time, I was small for my age, about 4 feet 8 inches, and hadn't started puberty yet. I got picked on because of my size. One day, while everyone in the barracks was on break, something happened. I don't know how it started, but suddenly I was trying to defend myself from a group of older kids messing with me. It got loud, and soon more kids joined in or just watched. Eventually, they overpowered me. The oldest kid there seemed to take charge. They dragged me to one of the beds, and I was trying to fight back, kicking, biting, clawing. But I couldn't get free because they had used handcuffs. I don't remember everything clearly, but I know they tried to hurt me with a broom handle. To this day, I don't think they succeeded. I don't remember anyone stepping in, but maybe that's why it stopped. Or maybe I struggled enough that they gave up. The next thing I knew, everyone was getting ready for the next event. We lined up outside like nothing had happened. I've never told anyone. No police officer, not my parents, not even my wife. Just the people reading this now. I don't think about it often, and I don't feel like it completely defined my life, but writing this brings up a lot of emotions I didn't expect. Thanks for reading. Story 11. My ex-husband was incredibly violent. We were together for 6 years. On several occasions, I genuinely feared for my life. There was a time when I was left unconscious and injured in the garage, until our then 2-year-old daughter found me and woke me up. He had left me there on the cold floor while he went fishing. One night, after he hit me so hard that my tooth went through my lip and became loose, I sat in the bathroom, cleaning myself up in front of the mirror. I was so angry. I took his toothbrush and used it to clean the toilet bowl, then placed it back where it belonged. I barely slept that night. In the morning, when his alarm went off, I watched him walk into the bathroom, follow his usual routine, and then brush his teeth. He kissed me goodbye, while I pretended to be asleep. I hoped he got a taste of his own disrespect that day. I fled with our 2 beautiful children 3.5 years ago. Even though he still tries to stalk and harass us, my children and I are finally safe and happier than we ever were with him. Story 12. I have a very large extended family. People I still don't even know. And I'm 44 now. Back in high school in the early 90s, I had a fairly typical teenage experience. I met a beautiful girl on the swim team, and we started dating. A few months in, things got more serious. And eventually, she became pregnant. With twins, 2 beautiful girls. Around the 8th month of the pregnancy, we found out that her mother and my mother were first cousins, which made us second cousins. We had already been together for nearly 2 years by then. As expected, the family was shocked and divided for years. But by that point, she and I were already deeply in love. We got married, had a mostly happy marriage, and 12 years later we divorced as we started to grow apart, something that often happens with couples who marry young. Even after the divorce, we remained close friends for the sake of our daughters. I started my own business, bought her a house so she could live peacefully with the girls, and got a place nearby for myself. Our daughters are now adults and love both of us equally because we always worked as a team, even after everything. Story 13. My grandmother's brother, Henricus Alexander Theodorus Legrand, was a Dutch officer during World War II. When the family was evacuated from the Netherlands, my grandmother, who was only 12 at the time, met a historical figure alongside other girls and received a pair of shoes during that encounter. Her father and uncle were both supporters of the regime at the time. After the war ended, Henri fled the Netherlands, changed his identity and background, and eventually became a well-known potter in Australia. He got married, had children, and in 1969 was awarded an MBE for his contributions to the arts. My grandmother was the only person left who could have testified against him, but after indirectly losing her younger sister, her mother, and, due to complications, her older brother, she chose never to speak of him again. He passed away in 1978 as a regular citizen, and his pottery is still on display in galleries. If I had the means, I'd buy every piece and make sure it no longer existed. Some things should not be celebrated. Story 14. Back in 1997, when I was 7 years old, I used to spend every other weekend sleeping over at my friend's house across the street. We were told never to go into his father's loft above the garage. One night, my friend, his sister, and I decided to check it out anyway. There was nothing up there but a chair, a TV, and a VCR. We turned on the TV and VCR, and a very inappropriate tape started playing. At the time, we didn't understand what we were seeing, so we tried to imitate it. My friend and I were both 7 years old, and his sister was almost 9. We had no real understanding of what we were doing. We just thought it was a secret game. Every time I stayed over, we would play it after the parents had gone to bed. One night, while camping in a tent in the backyard, something unexpected happened, and there was some bleeding. We got scared and weren't sure what to do. We were trying to come up with a story so we wouldn't get in trouble. A neighbor who shared a fence with them overheard us talking. He came over, offered us a place to clean up, and then sat us down and explained things. At the time, we were relieved she didn't need to go to the hospital. He told us he wouldn't tell anyone, and even offered his garage if we ever wanted a place to play during future sleepovers. Back then, we didn't realize it, but now it's clear what he was doing. He never physically touched us, but he would sit nearby and guide what we were doing, even suggesting things based on what he had seen. Our parents never found out. This continued for about 1.5 years, until my family moved to a new city. Shortly after we moved, the neighbor disappeared for a while, leaving behind his own child and girlfriend. Years later, through Facebook, I reconnected with those friends. We talked about what happened and realized how manipulated we were. Thankfully, none of us were deeply traumatized, and we've all gone on to live happy and healthy lives. We even got in touch with the neighbor's son and learned that his father had passed away a couple months after I moved. We believe he might have feared being exposed without me nearby. We told his son what happened, but aside from that, no one else knows. Today, I'm married, my old friend is engaged, and his sister has children of her own. We talk occasionally online, and we're all doing okay. Story 15. My mom had a friend who had 2 kids, both girls. We'd sometimes go over to visit. I always got the impression that my mom's friend wasn't the nicest person. Her kids had a rebellious streak, not in a mean way, just in a way that didn't align with how adults expected them to behave. One time, when I was about 5 or 6 years old, we visited, and her kids were being wild, just acting out. After things calmed down, I was playing a normal kids game when the 2 of them decided to start running around without clothes. I didn't join in. I was mostly shocked, but I also remember feeling confused, like it was something new and strange. Eventually, their mom walked in and found them in the room with me. We knew they'd be in trouble. She dragged the older one into the bathroom. I wasn't allowed in, but I could hear everything from the hallway. The yelling, the crying, it sounded terrible. When the girl came out, she had bruises and a black eye, and quietly went to get dressed. It's one of my earliest memories. Before that moment, I never realized a parent could treat their own child that way. Story 16. Last year, I was hospitalized with COVID. I had to be placed on a ventilator for 3 weeks, put into a medically induced coma, and was resuscitated multiple times. I was very close to death during that period. My dark secret is that, at the time, I wanted to let go. I was going through a divorce and dealing with severe depression. It felt like my world had collapsed, and I honestly didn't care if I made it through. Part of me was almost relieved that the virus might do what I didn't have the strength to do myself. I accepted that I might not make it, and didn't feel like fighting anymore. But while I was in that coma, the hospital made a rare exception and allowed my family to come say goodbye. My mother, who raised me alone, sat beside me and told me how much she loved me, how strong I was, and begged me to keep fighting. That moment changed everything. Even though I was unconscious, I heard her, and something inside me shifted. I turned a corner that night. Slowly but surely, I began to recover. It has been a long road, and I'm still healing, but I'm alive. I've told my mom how much her words meant to me, but I've never told anyone that I had already given up before that moment. If the hospital hadn't allowed her in, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be here today. Story 17. I never graduated from any level of college. It took me 5 years to finish undergrad. I took the video game route for year 1, but I never actually completed it. By the end of my 5th year, all of my friends had already moved on, and I felt so embarrassed. So, I applied for a master's program at a graduate school under a special exception, with the condition that I would complete my last 2 remaining undergraduate classes while also working on my master's. That never happened. I ended up being just 9 credits away from a master's when the school discovered I hadn't officially finished my undergrad. They told me I couldn't complete the graduate program until I did. That was 10 years ago, and I haven't even thought seriously about going back since. Because of that, I couldn't find jobs easily, so I started launching business after business. The good news? I ended up being really good at marketing and eventually started my own agency. In 2019, my agency was ranked as a top 10 digital marketing agency in the United States. Story 18. I haven't felt even a single moment of real happiness in a couple of years now. I don't like the idea of family or people I interact with knowing that, so I just stay quiet and avoid talking about anything deep or personal. It's been really dark and lonely. I could be in a room full of people and still feel completely alone. I had good things going at one point, and I had people around me who meant the world to me. But somehow, my own mind got the best of me, and I ruined it. Since then, every day has just felt like something I need to get through. I used to laugh at those movie scenes where someone completely falls apart after a breakup, living in a messy apartment, surrounded by takeout boxes, and then they magically reunite in the end, stronger than ever. But it doesn't really work like that. When you truly love someone and they love you back, it becomes something deeply rooted in you, like part of who you are. And then one day, you realize you're at your limit. The arguments, the breakdowns, the feelings of hopelessness just get too heavy. You try to convince yourself it's better to let go. For a while, you play that game. I'm better off, and so on. But eventually, the reality hits like a plane crashing down on top of you. You made a choice you can't undo. Those feelings don't go away. Not for me. I still remember the small things, like feeling her legs against mine, or sitting together on the couch watching the same episode of The Office for the 100th time, and not even noticing, because I was just lost in the comfort of her presence. If I had the choice between experiencing that again for one day, or getting $1,000, I'd choose that day every time. Now, there's no happiness, just distractions and a lot of pain. If you're lucky enough to have something good, don't let insecurity and fear damage it. Don't give up on your person, your partner in life, or whatever you want to call them. Story 19. My dad died 10 years ago when I was 15. A family friend who also worked with my father told me when I was 22 that my dad had a long-term relationship with another woman while still being married to my mother. That friend believes my dad loved my mother as the mother of his children, but that this other woman was the true love of his life. Unfortunately, she passed away 2 years before he did, so I never had the chance to meet her. To this day, I'm the only one in the family who knows his secret, and I have no plans to ever tell my mother or older brother. The deepest part of this secret is that even though I love my mother, and even though betrayal is never right, I can understand him. When I was just 1 or 2 years old, he had to move for work to a city that was 7 hours away by car. He asked my mother to move with him, but she refused for reasons that, in hindsight, didn't make much sense. So, for nearly 14 years, he worked away from home Monday to Friday and came back every weekend. He was also the sole provider, as my mother was a stay-at-home parent. I believe he didn't divorce her to give us a sense of a normal family life without major disruptions. And while I'll never justify what he did, I can at least understand the loneliness and sacrifice he carried. Story 20. I was at a sleepover years ago with some friends, and we decided to play Charlie Charlie. One of my friends said, "Charlie Charlie, are you in the bathroom?" And the pencil apparently moved to yes. We were so spooked that we ran outside, burned the paper, and all decided to sleep in the same room. 2 girls in one bed and 3 guys in another. Everyone fell asleep, except me. Later in the night, I really needed to go to the bathroom. Then I remembered that Charlie Charlie was supposedly in there, and my 10-year-old brain started to panic. So, I came up with what I thought was a brilliant plan. I looked around the room and saw a water bottle with water still in it, not mine. And, being the scared 10-year-old I was, I decided to pee on the carpet and pour some of the water over it to make it look like it had just spilled. I went back to bed and slept peacefully. The next morning, everyone was drying the floor. I don't think they realized it was anything other than water, and they definitely didn't know it was me. Story 21. I dropped out of university halfway through the first year, but didn't tell anyone except a few close friends. Instead, I traveled around Europe doing part-time jobs, came home during holidays, and had a great time for 3 years, until graduation season came around. I told my family I had earned a great IT degree, and even added it to my CV. Everyone was proud. I was the first in the family to attend university, so no one questioned it. Nobody asked to see a diploma, and I simply said I didn't attend the graduation ceremony. When it was time to get my first job, I had enough knowledge from the few months I did attend university, plus a natural talent for the field, to ace the graduate interview. With that degree, I looked like a top candidate. I started working, and no one ever asked for proof. I kept learning everything I needed on the job, worked my way up for 5 years, and eventually moved on to another role, this time without including the degree on my CV. I'd honestly be surprised if more people haven't done something similar and gotten away with it. Story 22. I was bullied non-stop by twin sisters all through elementary, middle school, and the first year of high school. We lived in a small town, so we were in the same classes, rode the same bus, and saw each other constantly. It didn't matter how nice I tried to be to them, or how much I tried to avoid them if they were having a bad day. Things got so bad that just waiting at the bus stop made me feel sick. I even had moments where I felt completely hopeless and overwhelmed. During that first year of high school, we went on a field trip to a mountain park. I don't want to be too specific because I still feel conflicted about what happened. First, we looked at the plants and whatever else the school brought us there for. Honestly, I don't remember much of it. Eventually, we walked up a fairly tall hill that overlooked the park and had lunch there. While we were sitting and chatting, one of the sisters walked closer to the edge of the hill with some of her friends. At one point, she turned her back toward the slope. There were a lot of loose branches on the ground, and with all the noise and distraction around, nobody noticed when her sandal got caught in one of them. She lost her balance and fell off the edge. It took several seconds for everyone to realize what had happened. I had seen the whole thing, but I didn't say a word. Deep down, I hoped she wasn't seriously hurt. But I also felt a strange sense of justice, given how many years I had spent crying because of their bullying. She was injured badly enough that she had to miss the rest of the school year. I remember her sister crying on the bus ride home, and for a moment, I felt the kind of release I had wished for during all those hard years. I know it's not right to take satisfaction in someone else's pain, and that's why I always lied and said I didn't see anything. Story 23. I don't tell the woman I live with about a lot of the things that happen. She often gets very anxious and seems to believe the worst whenever something goes wrong. So instead, I usually handle things quietly, behind the scenes. 2 years ago, we had a new roof put on our house. While working on it, I found some rotted planks and a few other areas that looked concerning. If I had told her, she probably would have worried herself sick, convinced that the roof was going to collapse if a bird landed on it. I replaced all of the damaged wood, and although she saw me working on it, she believes it was just a cosmetic repair. 4 years ago, we had some major structural work done under the house by professionals. The issue was fully resolved, but she still believes the house will eventually become unsafe again and that we'll need to redo everything. I do the same thing when I get sick. Earlier this year, I had kidney stones, but I just told her I had a stomach bug. Right now, I'm dealing with shingles, but she thinks it's just a mild rash. If I tell her the full truth, she asks constant questions and becomes very stressed. And when I have to keep talking about it, it makes everything feel more difficult to deal with. Story 24. My ex-wife became pregnant with triplets, which made me incredibly happy. But she only wanted 1 child and suggested that we consider reducing the pregnancy to a single baby. I wanted all 3. After many emotional discussions, she agreed to keep 2 and went ahead with reducing the pregnancy to twins. While I respect her right to make decisions about her own body, I couldn't shake the deep sadness I felt for the child we never got to meet. That grief consumed me and changed the way I expressed love and joy. I became distant, and eventually, that emotional distance created a rift between us. We ended up separating, but we never told anyone the truth about what had happened. She told others that we divorced because I had cheated on her. I always just said we drifted apart, but people believed her. I lost friends, and I never corrected the story because I didn't want our children to know what had happened before they were born. To this day, I know which of my twins would not have been born had things gone her way. The doctor had marked the highest-placed embryo as the one to be removed. But plans changed, and that child was born second. He is a wonderful kid, full of life and joy. It's hard not to feel the loss of the third, even though I continue to support the belief that such decisions are personal. What still hurts is not just the loss, but being judged for something I didn't do, while carrying a silent grief that no one else knows about. Story 25. I saw the school counselor in high school on a weekly basis. She was awful to me. She dismissed my experiences and often supported the people who were making my life miserable. A small group of us, all students who saw her regularly, formed our own version of a breakfast club. We bonded over the shared feeling that we weren't being taken seriously. Most of us agreed that she didn't really help. She would sit there and judge us, sometimes quite openly. She'd say things like, "That's not bad enough to get anyone else involved," or "Other people have it worse." It always seemed like she had some excuse not to do her job. Eventually, the truth caught up to her. A younger student, a sophomore, had been experiencing serious abuse at home and had been talking to this counselor about it for months. She had asked for help and hoped for some kind of intervention. But nothing happened. Whether the counselor didn't believe her or just didn't act, the situation continued. Finally, the student went to the police. Evidence was gathered, and an investigation confirmed her claims. The school board found out before the story even hit the press. The counselor resigned shortly afterward. If it were up to me, she wouldn't have kept any retirement benefits, but that's not my call. The principal resigned too, saying she needed to re-evaluate her entire role in education. The whole event left a mark. At least now that counselor no longer holds any position of responsibility over others. That's the only comfort I can find in all of this. I hope her replacement truly listens. Too many people from my class aren't around anymore. The number of substance-related and mental health-related losses keeps growing. And as someone who once needed that support myself, I feel a small relief knowing she's no longer in that position. Story 26. I used to lie every day to my parents about going to work and college. I would edit screenshots of past grades to make them look current, create fake report cards, and even research topics I learned during the day so I could talk about them at dinner. I'd pretend I had shifts at work, even though I didn't have a car. In the winter, I'd stay outside for up to 8 hours in the freezing cold, just so they wouldn't catch on. I was making some money by playing a video game competitively, so my parents didn't question my finances. They could see I could afford small things, so they assumed everything was fine. I felt immense pressure to succeed, from both myself and my family. But school just wasn't for me. Instead of facing that truth, I kept lying to avoid disappointing them. I became deeply depressed, and over the course of a year, things only got worse. Eventually, my dad caught on. He was doing my taxes and asked for college documents to confirm I was still a full-time student. I couldn't provide them. That's when everything unraveled. I confessed to everything, how I had spent a whole year fabricating a life that didn't exist. My parents weren't thrilled, but they didn't turn their backs on me. They took me to our family doctor, and I was prescribed medication for my depression. They also paid for therapy, which I still attend once a month. 7 months later. I truly believed they would give up on me, that I'd end up with nothing and no one. But they didn't. I now have a full-time job, make decent money, bought a car, and I'm currently looking at apartments for next year, even though the prices are wild. I'm so thankful for my friends, my siblings, and especially my parents, who stuck with me despite everything. But I also thank myself for not giving up. Even in the darkest moments, even when it feels like there's no way out, ask for help. People might surprise you, and with the right support, one day you'll see that light at the end of the tunnel. Life is worth living. Don't give up. Story 27. I slept with a woman in my early 20s, and at the time, I didn't know she was married. A few months later, through a series of unrelated events, I discovered she was pregnant. The timeline matched perfectly, and since we hadn't used protection, I started to wonder. Her Facebook account was public, and I quietly followed her posts before and after the pregnancy. Her son looks nothing like her husband. He actually looks exactly like me. There's no doubt in my mind that I'm his biological father. Recently, he was hospitalized, and the family started a fundraising campaign to help cover the costs of a procedure overseas. I anonymously donated the full amount. I felt like it was the least I could do. Their family seems happy, and I would never do anything to disrupt that. I guess I'll keep watching from afar, but it hurts every time I think about it. I just hope he has a good life. Story 28. I don't know if this counts, but when I was little, my dad used to talk in his sleep. Full conversations, often sounding like arguments with himself. Later, he had to go to rehab. I asked my mom why he couldn't come home, and she told me he's staying at a place where people go to get better. At the time, I just assumed he was spending time with a friend. Years later, I learned the truth. My dad had been struggling with addiction. My mom used to find him unconscious on the floor when I was at school. Looking back, I now realize the sleep-talking and other signs were connected to that struggle. I was probably in first grade or even younger. He's no longer using, but he's been in a wheelchair since before I was a teenager. Nowadays, he's emotionally hard to be around. He starts arguments over everything and has put financial strain on our family. Even small things like headaches make him demand hospital visits, and my mom always takes him, even when it's unnecessary. He doesn't see how much pressure he puts on her, or how much it affects us. My allowance comes from my aunt, not even my parents. It's hard living in this situation, but I'm doing my best to stay grounded. Story 29. My high school had a prom weekend getaway at a beach house following our senior prom. The whole grade went, and it was a fun time. We spent the weekend hanging out, relaxing, and enjoying ourselves. We met up with a lot of people from school, but something happened that completely changed the way I remember that weekend. I later found out that my best friend at the time had taken advantage of his prom date while everyone was asleep. She was also a close friend of mine. As soon as I learned what happened, I cut all ties with him. It broke me emotionally. There were around 20 people in the house, and none of us had any idea. He waited until no one could intervene. To this day, I don't think he knows I found out. But I do, and I've never looked at him the same. He was devastated when I ended our friendship. He was like a brother to me. But I won't be a bystander when something so serious happens. That weekend may have been filled with good memories for many people, but for me, the truth behind it still haunts me. Some things are simply unforgivable. Story 30. This is really difficult for me to talk about. It's one of the biggest regrets of my life, and something that still affects me deeply. On my birthday 4 years ago, I crossed a boundary in my relationship without realizing it in the moment. We had been together for 4 years at the time, and were expecting friends over to the house we shared. I wanted to be intimate before they arrived, but my girlfriend wasn't in the mood. I misunderstood her refusals as playful rather than serious, which remains the worst mistake I've ever made. I kept going, and eventually, things happened the way they usually did between us. But afterward, as we sat on the bed, she quietly said, "I didn't want to do that." And then she burst into tears. My heart sank. I immediately realized I had hurt the person I loved most. She had been through a traumatic experience when she was younger, and that day brought back pain she had carried for years. I still struggle with the fact that I didn't recognize the signs, that I didn't stop and listen better. We talked about it, and despite everything, we stayed together for another 4 years in what was, overall, a loving relationship. She told me she forgave me, but I haven't yet fully forgiven myself. I hope one day I can. Story 31. One day in early high school, I went to a dentist appointment and realized I really had to go to the bathroom. At that office, you have to ask for a key at the front desk, so I did and went to take care of business. After flushing, I noticed the water level wasn't stopping. It just kept rising. I stood there in shock, not knowing what to do. Then it overflowed onto the floor. Panicked, I rushed out, dropped off the bathroom key, and just as I did, the dentist came in to call me back for the appointment. As I sat in the chair with the dentist working on my teeth, a receptionist came in and said, "The bathroom is flooding. There's water everywhere." The dentist left the room, and I turned bright red, terrified they knew it was me. When he came back, he started explaining how toilets can sometimes clog and overflow due to a malfunction. I couldn't tell if he was trying to hint that he knew or just being polite. The appointment ended, and as I walked out, I passed the bathroom. It was blocked off. Water was running down the stairs. I left as quickly as I could. Maybe no one figured it out. Maybe they did, and just didn't say anything. Either way, I got out of there without a word being said. Story 32. I've always been overly observant. I don't mean to be. It's just how I am. I notice small things people try to hide. It's not that I think I'm some kind of detective, but I've picked up on things people never expected me to notice. For example, I once found out my ex was planning to break up with me over the holidays because I saw her messages left open while using her laptop for college orientation. I've caught coworkers being shady, and I've even removed embarrassing accounts from my dad's social media, just to save us both the awkwardness. But this next one was different. It was heavier. My dad's Amazon account was linked to my streaming device, and I never bothered to switch to my own account. After I moved apartments, I logged back in, and it synced across my devices. One day, while checking a delivery, I accidentally opened his order history. I saw a package sent to a different address, addressed to someone saved as Princess, and it included an item that made me panic. I didn't know what to do. I talked about it anonymously online, trying to make sense of it. I had 5 choices: tell my siblings, tell my mom, tell my grandmother, leave the account open and hope someone else saw it, or say nothing. I chose to stay quiet. Later, I gently asked my dad if anyone else used the account. He said no. I still haven't told anyone. Since then, he's been posting a lot of affectionate things toward my mom, acting more loving, and I sometimes wonder, did something happen behind the scenes? Did my mom find out on her own? Did he change? I don't know. But I still carry that weight. The knowledge, the possibility, and the silence. And I don't know if, or when, I'll ever say anything. Until then, it just lives in the back of my mind. Story 33. My former sister-in-law once admitted to me that she had married the wrong last-name boy. My brother isn't exactly the best man, but she had her own struggles as well, and from what I've been told, she was a different person behind closed doors. At first, her comment seemed like a light-hearted remark, but I later realized how serious she was when she began sending me messages that quickly became inappropriate. She would tell me, while I was at work, that she was thinking about me in ways that crossed a clear line, and eventually even sent revealing photos. Most people would say I was crazy for not going along with it, especially given how attractive she is. But this was family. I felt the best thing to do was to gently turn her down, while also making sure the rest of the family never found out. One day, she stopped by for coffee while my wife was at work, and she tried to take things further. I've never been so conflicted, caught between being flattered and completely panicked. I did my best to slow things down without being disrespectful or making her feel worse. Eventually, she started asking questions about whether I'd ever consider leaving my wife for her. It didn't feel right to let things linger, so I told her the truth, firmly but kindly. Thankfully, she wasn't angry. She was mostly disappointed, and truthfully, she just needed someone to talk to during a tough time in her life. She appreciated that I was kind to her, instead of treating her like some kind of villain. Not long after that, she and my brother ended their relationship. They had both been unfaithful to each other. I often think about how disastrous it would have been for our family if I had made a different choice. That was 5 years ago. I finally told my wife just a few months ago. She understood why I had waited and said she didn't think something like that could have been kept quiet if it had come out back then. Her reaction was supportive, and I was relieved. To this day, no one else in the family knows what happened. With kids involved, nieces, nephews, grandchildren, it wouldn't help anyone to dig that story up now. Sometimes, the best thing is to let certain truths stay in the past. Story 34. When I was 5, my dad passed away from cancer. After that, my mom and sister became a team, and I was kind of left to figure things out on my own. I managed, but I carried some scars that would resurface later in life. I'm a simple guy and didn't understand much about mental health until about 5 years ago. Then everything from my childhood started to make sense. That's when I lost control. I started pushing people away for no reason, picking fights in the street, and using substances heavily. I didn't look back. Things got even more overwhelming when my girlfriend became pregnant. I had no idea how to handle it. I kept thinking, how am I supposed to do this? I felt lost. One night, when my son was only a few months old, I went out and used more than I ever had before. My heart started beating wildly, irregularly, and it stayed that way for hours. I came home, lay in bed next to my girlfriend, now fiancée, with our son sleeping between us, and I cried while writing a note in my phone. It was filled with regrets and apologies. I truly believed that night would be my last. But I didn't die. I woke up the next morning to my fiancé calling out, asking if I wanted a coffee and some breakfast. I deleted the note. That was the turning point. I quit cold turkey and turned everything around. Now I have the best relationship I could ever imagine with my son, and I've never felt healthier. The past may chase you, but it doesn't have to define you. You can choose to fight and win. Story 35. I joined the military at 17, and my training program lasted 11 months. On weekends, we were allowed to go off base, and large groups of us would split hotel rooms. Usually, 6 to 8 people shared a room, so after a long night out, someone was always crashing on the floor. That night, I was one of them. I was sleeping in my summer PT uniform, a loose t-shirt and shorts with built-in mesh lining. Most of the girls cut the mesh out, but I never bothered. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to someone covering my mouth and pinning me down. A fellow soldier, someone well over 6 feet tall, was on top of me. My shorts had been moved to the side, and he was trying to force his way past the lining. I couldn't breathe, and no matter how much I struggled, he barely moved. Suddenly, someone outside the room started pounding on the door, yelling that his girlfriend was inside. It was chaos. The guy on top of me jumped off in an instant and started pulling his clothes back on, just as the rest of the room started waking up, too dazed to know what had happened. It turned out the guy banging on the door had the wrong room. No one knew who he was. But that stranger showing up, along with the mesh lining I never cut out, likely saved me from something horrible that night. To the man I'll never meet, thank you. I truly hope you found your girlfriend. Story 36. I work as a nurse at one of the top trauma centers in my area. During a stretch of bad weather, I was on shift when we were notified of an incoming trauma case. Someone had lost control on the ice and crashed into a telephone pole. The driver lost their pulse at the scene, and although EMS managed to bring him back briefly, they couldn't sustain it for long. As the charge nurse, it's my job to check in with the emergency department to assess the situation and make staffing or unit adjustments for critical cases. When I arrived, the scene was devastating. The patient had suffered extensive injuries, including a severe head injury. I noticed a 40K tattoo on his right shoulder, and half-jokingly asked one of the EMTs if his name was Joe. It was. He was a friend from high school. His family was told he passed away peacefully. But what happened was much harder than that. I carried the weight of that knowledge silently. That day still stays with me. I've also cared for another person I knew from school. She was brought in during a psychiatric crisis and needed intensive care. Seeing someone I once knew in such a vulnerable and painful state reminded me of just how unpredictable and fragile life can be. Story 37. My dark secret is that, during a lonely and difficult period of my life, I had encounters with S-workers. There's one experience in particular that has stayed with me. I've since taken a very different path. I'm now married, religious, and have worked hard to become a better version of myself. But this chapter still lingers in my thoughts. I met a woman through a classified ad. We connected in the way we were expected to, but something unexpected happened. She kissed me, which rarely happens in that context. We exchanged real phone numbers and started seeing each other more regularly. We developed a kind of connection. Even though it remained transactional, we often spent time talking, watching TV, and even giving each other massages. She was kind, thoughtful, and easy to be around. Over time, I learned she was struggling with a hero addiction. Sometimes, before we met, she'd ask for rides to certain places or excuse herself to use. Other times, she'd contact me when she wasn't feeling well and needed to support her habit. Eventually, she left the area and entered rehab. I also left and began studying my faith deeply. From what I've seen online, she's clean now, in a stable relationship, and even hosts a podcast about recovery. I'm genuinely happy for her. She was always a good person deep down. Still, it haunts me. I supported her habit without realizing the full extent of what I was doing. Looking back, I question whether I took advantage of her vulnerability, even if it never felt that way at the time. I even once picked her up from the home she shared with her boyfriend. It was a dark period, and no one in my life knows the full story. Except now, here. This experience keeps me humble. It reminds me of how easy it is to justify poor choices when you're lost and lonely, and how far you can go down a path without realizing just how far you've strayed. I haven't spoken to her in years, but I still hope she's doing well. I carry the memory with me, not out of shame, but as a lesson I never want to forget.